Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Hey man,
What's happening, Bruce?
just living the dream.
So, everybody, before we get started, I'll say Greg is not with us tonight. So, he's playing hooky. So, next week, we get to give him a hard time and let him know that he is not allowed to play hooky when it's Stream Team night. Isn't that right, Bruce?
That's right.
Gotta hold them accountable.
Huh?
Gotta hold them accountable there.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. We've been doing this for almost 3 years, and for him to take a night off, how could he? How could
Yeah.
he? So,
That's right.
Bruce, what is going on down in southeast Alabama?
Well, yesterday I had a chance to go in my colonies, a bunch of them. I haven't been in a while. I had yesterday off from work, which is unusual on a Tuesday, and they're looking pretty good. I did some mite washes and found most of them were really good, zeros, ones, twos. Even a few that were a little higher. But then I had a couple that were pretty high, like much higher than I want. So maybe I can get some advice from Mary tonight as to what to do about these mites in southeast Alabama in October. But anyway, yeah, they're looking really good. We've had, most of them have pretty good weight on them. They just look really healthy. It's interesting though, the more I do this, the more I can tell when I crack open a colony of bees that the ones that are a little bit sick or they don't look quite right. And then sure enough, you take the mite wash and, they wash above threshold. And so it's kind of, I'm getting more skilled at that and being able to tell. One of them, I actually saw a mite, which I don't see mites very often on a bee. And I'm like, well,
Wow.
This one's going to be a problem. And sure enough, I washed a 22 on that one. So it was not good. About, what's that, 7 point something %. So I got to address that issue. But overall, looking really good. The splits I made a few weeks back I think they're looking pretty good down there at Appling Farms. And pretty excited about it. I will tell you this too, Brian, and the people in the thread here. I mentioned I did that grafting in late August, I think it was, that I thought was a total flop, and I only ended up with 3 cells. Only ended up making splits, I think, with a couple of them. One of them I don't think was any good. And it looks like both of those little queens have taken. One of them's really laying it up nicely, and the other one is just kind of getting started. I'm not sure how good of a queen she's going to be, but, so I got a couple extra colonies out of that. So it's kind of exciting. That I would have much rather had a better take than 3 out of 30. But back in the spring, I was saying I got 26 out of 30, so I thought I had it figured out. But it is difficult this time of year.
Yeah.
But beyond that, things are going well. I do have a video that is very, very close to dropping. Probably going to drop it this weekend. About the thorn wax filter. I've been working on that thing for weeks, and finally it's about done. So I hope folks enjoy that. But just excited to talk to Mary tonight and see what's going on down there in Florida and kind of what she's all about.
Yeah.
How about you, Brian? What's going on up there? And
my way, I got into my colonies yesterday. We're pretty much at the tail end of everything. The goldenrod it's done. Pretty much everything is about done. So I went over and I had added shims on all the colonies. I have that new Hive Alive. They're what are they branding it? They're super syrup. It's the easy feed.
So, yeah.
Those small packets. So I put some of those on each colony. I also put a bucket on every colony, so that way they've got food inside. They've got the bucket outside. I also got the Viroxan on the colonies, so we'll see how that does. My washes have not been exceptionally high this year. It's probably the only thing that has gone right this year, but we'll see how that Viroxan works out. It's a newer product, so I'm just curious. If it ends up that it's another tool that I can add into my arsenal, then it's another tool I can use. So, but I've got one colony that they were, it's probably been about 2 weeks ago now that they decided they wanted to requeen themselves. And I ended up just doing a combine. I did a paper combine of one of the colonies I had in one of my resource hives, and wouldn't you know it, it didn't take. So that colony is sitting there, and they've made cells. Well, now in Ohio, we've got, I think, 3 more days where it's in the 70s, and then we've got 60s. We've got our midnight temps are going to be in the 40s some nights. So they're going to be done. And instead of me fighting with it, I am just going to shake the bees out and combine over and just kind of equalize where I've got some colonies that aren't quite as big. I'm just going to distribute out those frames and, just to use them. I'd rather have stronger colonies at this point than to try and fight with one that doesn't want to cooperate. So, but things are like almost about at the tail end. I am pulling out my insulated inners. I want to make that insert so that I had a problem last year. And Mary, I used those insulated inner covers from Bee Smart Designs. And
I'm not familiar with that one.
I'd say they're probably about 3 inches thick. And then there's foam in there. And it kind of gives you like an R8 or somewhere around in there, R7, R8
yeah.
in there. And it just kind of keeps that heat bubble in. Well, I ended up putting another shim on top of that with some great stuff. That way it added a little bit more insulation, and I used the Hive Alive fondant. And I had a couple colonies that they just chewed the heck out of that foam that's in the top. I mean, they just about annihilated it. So I've got several 3D printers here. So I'm going to build like an insert that will go down through my inner, the hole, and I'm going to get a piece of Luan. That way the bees can't get to any of that foam. So that's about the last, I think, like construction type project that I have going on. And then things will pretty much, we'll be in the winter. So it's the liquid feed now until it's cold. And I can't even believe that this season's going to be done. But up here in Northeast Ohio, our weather, it's going to get cool here real quick. So, but that's all. So everybody, we have a guest tonight that I think I've known you just online for, oh my gosh. Well, I finished my apprentice and I finished my advanced level of the beekeeper program. And I just started my master level. And I really have enjoyed that program. With the master beekeeper programs that are out there, I did a little bit of research looking around at a couple of the different programs. And I was just really drawn to the program that University of Florida offers. And I truly have enjoyed it so far. It's been, I enjoy that it's self-paced, everything about it, the resources that are there. I really enjoy it. So, but that's where I for those watching, that's where I met Mary. So, but Mary, why don't you tell us a little bit about your history with bees and how you got connected with University of Florida. And I know you work with some great folks down there. You work with Ellis and Cameron Jack, and there's just a list of names there.
It's an amazing lab.
Yeah. So tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thanks first for having me. I appreciate this. We were just talking before we started that it's just cool, all the different ways that people are learning about bees these days, like live streaming and podcasting and all these different options that are out there. So I'm largely associated with the lab through the Master Beekeeper program, although that's actually only a little piece of what I do at the lab. But I came by bees in sort of an odd roundabout way. I, like many people, just got interested in them when sort of the early 2000s, early aughts news about bees started happening, right? I am one of those beekeepers. So I, at some point when I was in college, decided I wanted to keep bees. I liked being outside. I grew up on a farm, so it wasn't like that big of a stretch, but I just sort of decided I wanted to get into bees. I went home from school one weekend and I told my dad about it, and he was like, well, I've got all the beekeeping equipment out in the barn already. Apparently when I was like a baby, he had tried keeping bees for a couple of years, and the pack rat that he is, he kept those hives, those boxes and stuff for 2 decades. So that was how I kind of dipped my toe into bees. We were classic, not prepared, bees died beekeepers. Like we did not do anything right, and we did not learn anything before we started. We just started and then they all died. So not to make this too long of a story, I worked in wildlife biology in my undergrad. That was what I studied, and I really came to bees fully through research. So I was studying native pollinators and wild bees first in Michigan, which is where I grew up. And then I had a short stopover at Copert, which is a company that produces bumblebees. They make those packages that get shipped out to commercial blueberry and watermelon growers.
Oh, wow.
And ultimately, I ended up down at the University of Florida because I was a technician on a research project down there where they were looking at pollinators in blueberry and watermelon fields in Florida and actually across the U.S. So came to Florida imagining I would live there for a year or two and then move on to some other research job, because that's kind of how wildlife biology jobs go. But life does not always follow the plans that you set out for it. So my now husband and I ended up staying down there for almost 6 years. You all might not actually know this, but I actually don't live in Florida anymore. I work for the lab remotely from Baltimore. So I haven't been down there for almost 5 years already, actually. So it's kind of been, a good time down there and then a good chunk away from Florida. But I'm still connected to the lab and the beekeepers in Florida. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you are right on by saying that, that lab, although I dabbled in bees before getting there, is where I learned everything I know about bees. I mean, the people that are there, and I was around for many previous iterations of people at the lab. Dr. Cameron Jack was master's student Cameron Jack when he started, and I was there.
Wow.
So it's been a while. I think I'm the second longest at the lab besides Jamie. He's obviously there, our OG. But the atmosphere of that lab is always to share and to give people opportunities to do things, and so that was how I learned everything almost that I know about bees, and where I got the opportunity to first speak to people about bees and share my research. And that's kind of how I learned to love teaching about bees, which is primarily what I do now. But I didn't know when I started down there that I was joining a world-class honeybee lab. I was just a 21-year-old looking for a job outside, and I was able to kind of deal with the Florida heat. So yeah, it was a long journey to kind of get there to get here. But I now am working for the lab from Baltimore. I do some various remote projects for them, and I am a very tiny scale beekeeper. I manage 4 hives at the moment, but I also run a very tiny beekeeping business. So when you're just doing everything by yourself, I'm in a sort of magical part of Baltimore where there's a million blooming trees everywhere. So I get a lot of honey from my 4 little colonies, and yeah, I get to keep in bees and, keep connected kind of to teaching as well through remote work with the lab. So it's been fun.
Awesome. That's interesting when you say you're over towards Baltimore, because I know several beekeepers over in that area.
Yeah.
So
we do, Bethesda has the bee lab, right? So there's definitely some bee folks in the area. Mm-hmm. Baltimore City, where I am, doesn't have really like established sort of bee infrastructure, I would say. Like, it's not really connected to extension. There's not really a city bee club. There's a couple of community gardens that are sort of like the main network of beekeepers, but for the size of city it's a little bit lacking in bee infrastructure, I guess I'll say.
Wow.
Now, you mentioned that you're involved still with the university through remote learning. Do you also still do research and actually How do you do that? Do you do stuff on your 4 colonies, or do they send you data and you kind of, what do you do exactly with your work with the lab as far as?
Yeah. I am long gone from research, actually. I went down there to do research. I did that for the first 3 years that I was at the lab. And then I kind of fell in love with teaching, and I fell
Okay.
in love with, that experience of new beekeepers learning about bees for the first time. So I have not done research in a long time. The goal of what I do at the lab, which is called extension, which is essentially education in a non-formal setting. So whether you know it or not, this is technically, sort of extension that's happening right now because a university employee is helping people learn about bees, hopefully. So the goal of extension is essentially to share the research with beekeepers. So we're kind of that bridge in between what Jamie and Cameron and all the other, students are doing at the bee lab. Then we kind of take the research as it comes out and we share that with beekeepers, and we develop educational programs so that information isn't just sitting there and hopefully gets used, in the actual beekeeping community.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's pretty cool that you can do that. The modern era makes it's so cool how you can remotely do stuff like that.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. It can be relatively seamless. I've been working with a cohort of beekeepers over the last year and a half who are building businesses essentially out of their beekeeping hobby. And I've been working with them for a year and a half, like very closely. And just last month, I was down in Florida, and somebody that I was talking to in the cohort didn't realize that I didn't live in Florida, so it's like we could just be so connected online that it kind of helps to bridge some gaps, It's pretty fun.
Sure.
Yeah. Technology now. I used to travel a ton with my job. And then when the pandemic hit, technology somewhat evolved what I do into I work remote from home.
Yeah.
So where years back, I only kept, really, it was the number of colonies like you have. I only kept a handful of colonies. But then being at home, I've dabbled a little bit more. And like last year, I got up to, I think I did have 21. I quickly found out, even, with me still working full time and the amount of time that I can give to the bees, I found out that was too much. And I was quickly humbled. I started losing some colonies, and, you just, when you can't take care of them, and you'll see the comments in here, hashtag Brian50. Yeah, right, John. But I would love to have 50 colonies or whatever, or I would love to have colonies like what Bruce has, but I don't have the time. That's my thing. Just, with home and everything else, it's just, I only have a certain amount of time that I can dedicate to the bees. And what I always say, what good would it be for me to expand my apiary when they're just going to end up dying? I wouldn't be able to take care of them. So maybe down the road, who knows, So
Mary, did you put together the Master Beekeeper program, or are you heavily involved with that? Is that
Yeah, it was a collaborative effort, but Jamie Ellis and I definitely did the most of the work of putting that together. So that was actually when I first left Florida. That was kind of my first remote job that I did was putting that program together. So yeah, I can talk a little bit of kind of about our program and how it came to be and how we made it. It started way back before me. I think it was 2007 or 2008, and it was based off of the University of Georgia Master Beekeeper program. That was where Jamie did some of his schooling, and his mentor was Keith Fielder. So he developed a lot of Florida's extension programs initially based off of University of Georgia's. So it's been around for a long time, but we, around 2015, 2016. The lab was really growing at that time. The talk of kind of building a new bee lab was starting, which some of you may be familiar with. And we were sort of collectively as a lab taking a good hard look at all of our programs and kind of trying to make sure that we were really teaching, or that we were really doing programs that were teaching beekeepers, that were useful to beekeepers, and that were really intentional of being educational. Because we were doing a lot of stuff, But you can do a lot of stuff without getting a lot of impact. So we kind of took a hard look at our Master Beekeeper program. And what we ultimately decided is that while it was a sound program, it was really a testing program. We weren't teaching beekeepers at all. We had a little bit of review materials that we would give people, but for the most part, people were on their own to study, and then they would come to us to take a test. And there are several Master Beekeeper programs like that still. It's a totally fine model, but for our goals as a lab to educate beekeepers, it just didn't really fit with what we tried to put out into the world. So we spent a lot of time, talking to beekeepers in Florida and trying to figure out, well, how can we best turn this program into something that is specifically educational? And through a lot of discussions and that sort of thing, we decided that ultimately an online program was going to be our way to kind of reach the most beekeepers, because we could, on the front end, put a whole lot of work into developing content, and we could just continually update that content, but not have to redo that teaching, year after year. So ultimately, that's what we did. I think we started really fully working on it in 2017. And then I think right at the start of 2021, maybe, is when we finished getting all 4 levels of the program online. Which basically means that we have 4 levels in our program. You start as an apprentice, then there's advanced Master Beekeeper, and then we kind of have an additional level that we call Master Craftsman, which is really focused on getting beekeepers involved in research and learning how to actually do experiments in their own hives and that sort of thing. But each of those levels is structured around an online course, basically. So that development of that took a long time, and it was mostly a collaboration between Jamie and I to make that happen. So he did a lot of the recording, and we developed the lessons together and that sort of thing. So yeah, it was definitely a team effort, but it is a little bit my baby. I kind of run it now, and I keep it going after, I don't know how many years it's been now, 5 years maybe. I'm happy to jump in. I just saw a question pop up, and the question was that is the program entirely online? So I wouldn't mind addressing that if y'all don't mind. Great. So it is entirely online, and we got a good bit of criticism, feedback, whichever you want to call it, when we kind of initially decided to make it go online, because there's definitely a conception, which I think is changing a little bit, as you said, things are just going more online anyway, that you can't learn beekeeping from a computer. And I always say that there's truth to that, and it's missing something as well. So I always say you can't learn beekeeping only from a computer, right? You have to have your hands in bees. You have to spend full seasons with your bees. You have to know how to manipulate frames and light a smoker and all that, right? So we have various ways that we've incorporated practical components into the program, but all of it can be done remotely. So you don't ever have to come to Florida. I travel to Florida sometimes, but it's never for the Master Beekeeper program. It's for other things. So, for example, we do practical exams, and you have to, as an apprentice, you have to show you can light a smoker and inspect a colony and find the queen and point everything out in the hive. And you just record that in your own apiary. You use a smartphone, you get someone to shoot it for you, or you prop your phone up. And, so there's ways with technology that even though it's 100% remote, you can, you're still getting that kind of practical piece added into it. So kind of an interesting mix.
That's the one, well, not just the one, but that's one of the things that kind of lured me into selecting University of Florida's program, just because how it's structured and how it's set up. Well, I'm in Northeast Ohio, so that's one of the things that I looked at when I was very first looking at, I want to further my education about bees, because it never can hurt. And when I was looking at all the different programs, I saw University of Florida, and I thought, well, am I going to have to fly down? How does this work? And then when I saw, well, you can film yourself, and I will say, for the videos, when you do film them, it's raw, so there's no editing, there's nothing like that. In YouTube, I can make myself look like the very best beekeeper on the face of the earth. You
Yeah.
can cut out all the mistakes, you can cut out everything. The videos that they have you submit are 100% raw. So there's absolutely no editing. It shows everything. And there's certain like criteria, there's certain talking points. When you're doing an inspection, they have you point out, here's brood, here's this, here's that. So there's somewhat of like a checklist. So it almost tells you what you need to speak about ahead of time. I still forgot some things.
Literally everyone does. I don't know that I've had like a small handful of perfect scores, but usually someone just forgets something. So
Yeah. Yeah. And like, with mine, I did the test out level. So if you are a seasoned beekeeper, you can test out of this one, the apprentice. And I know in my video that I did for that, I forgot just a couple things, but when I filmed it, it was late in the year. So there's certain things that up here in Northeast Ohio, really you don't see.
yeah.
So the best time I would say, to do certain videos, do them late spring or in the summer. Don't be a knucklehead like me and decide to do things late in the fall, because
You can do it. It just makes it harder on yourself.
yeah, it is. It's a little bit more of a challenge, but that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about the program. And, like I saw Gary, he said he's tech challenged, but, and I know Gary, I've met Gary. It's really like Mary said, if you have one of these right here, a phone, you could film stuff right on your phone. So you really, you don't need like an elaborate setup as far as filming things. You could have somebody stand there, or you could get a basic little tripod and just film yourself. So, and the structure as far as the program also with the videos, I'll say, they're very easy to watch, but I will say I learned very quickly that I have a notepad here, because it's not just like you're watching a YouTube video and that. I highly recommend, if anybody is looking at it, get yourself a notepad and take some notes, because a couple of the quizzes that they have, I'll sit there and I'm like, man, I just saw that 10 minutes ago, but what, so I find myself, I'm going back, rewatching things. And so it is, I would say it's a great program. So,
Thanks. I appreciate that. It is, it is the same lessons get used in Beekeeping 101 that's taught at the University of Florida. So it is a sort of university level, but I think it starts at a place that's accessible. We purposely built it so that you could come in with zero experience, and the apprentice beekeeper level would kind of teach you how to get started, or you could test out of the apprentice level and get started at the advanced. I will just say, I am not like here to tell you that everybody should take the UF program. Every time I talk about this program, I say that if you're interested in a master beekeeper program, do a branded and look around, see what the options are, because there's 20 something programs, I think, master beekeeper programs in the US. They are all different. Not two of them are the same. And so think about what you want to get out of the program. Are you looking for education, or are you looking for that certificate to go by your name? Some people are teaching people and they just want to be able to say, I'm a master beekeeper, because they think it might give them more, credence and that sort of thing. If that's the case, probably don't take one that requires all these other things. Just go take a test, and think about the things like geography, right? Like the one that's physically closest to you might not be the best fit for you, right? Like I think 2 of them now can be done fully online. I think it's Purdue and Florida. Maybe the California one might be going that way. I can't remember. But, think about what you want are trying to get out of the program, and kind of shop around for which ones are out there. Because I stand by our program, and I do really think it's a great educational option for you. But just, first of all, if you're watching a YouTube live, you're tech savvy enough to do the Florida program. I will just say that. But if you don't like computers at all, probably our program is not a good fit for you, So I always tell people to shop around and kind of think about those components when you're looking at different options.
Yeah. Amber has a great question here. Is there a time
Yeah.
frame that you must complete a section?
Yes. So, yes and no. So basically you can take as long as you want to complete at each level. So, meaning you can go as slowly as you want. You can't go as quickly as you want. Part of that practical component that I talked about before is that at each level of the program, you are spending 1 full year at that level of the program. And that's tied into that practical component where we know you're learning stuff from the online course, but we all know as beekeepers that doing things in a hive in the spring is different than doing things in the hive in the fall, right? If you're not getting a full season of beekeeping, then you're missing a key practical component of beekeeping. And so we do incorporate a full year of beekeeping with each level. So at that same time, you're doing all the other program requirements, you're taking the course, you're doing public outreach for various levels. So you're not just beekeeping, but that is tied into it. But in terms of minimum time or maximum time, there's no maximum time. So you can start it whenever you want, which is, I think, one of the really nice things about the program is you could go sign up for it right now and start taking the apprentice course tonight if you wanted to. And then you can take as long as you want to complete each level. So if you start a new job and you can't work on it for 6 months and then you come back to it, that's totally fine. I think that's a big benefit for beekeepers who are taking it. It's a little bit of an unfortunate on the lab side, just because we do sometimes get folks who kind of join and sort of peter out and don't come back or come back a lot later. So, we do have a lot of people who aren't necessarily active in the program who are participating in it. But I think for you, it's nice because you can kind of schedule it around whatever is happening in your life at that time, and you can always come back to it.
Yeah. Awesome. Gary had another question, but I'll tell everybody there have been a couple individuals that asked, where can you find information? I put the link right into chat, and that takes you right to this website right here, where it literally goes through all of the details of the program. I'll add also, and Gary asked another question about do you have to do presentations and speak? And there is I'll share a document here, and it goes through the requirements for each level. Like for the advanced, I think that right there is that there's 10 public service points that you have to complete. And basically, like Gary, what I did for mine is I went out to some schools, and I'm in I guess I guess I'm lucky in that, like, my daughter-in-law's mom is a teacher for a school. So she texted me the one day and said, you know, have you ever thought about going out to a school and speaking to kids? And I was like, yes, please, and I've had a couple other teachers in that reach out. So that kind of worked towards my favor in that I really didn't have to like pursue a lot of opportunities. There were folks that were asking me, hey, would you be interested in coming out? And I loved those. It's always some of the kids when you're out there talking at the schools, and it was always for the younger kids. It wasn't like high school level kids. It was always like grade school. Some of the kids, the expressions on their faces, it just always cracks me up.
They have some good questions too. I get some of my best bee questions from little kids. I'm like, how did you come up with that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they do. And I know, like, for the master level, where I'm at now, there's 20 of the public service points that you have, but then there's mentor points, and then there's continuing education. So, Gary, as you build and you go from level to level, there's additional points that are needed. So, yes, you could at the master level, you could speak at these various occasions. If you're connected with, schools, you could do that as well. So that's kind of like the beauty of this program, though, is to why I liked it, because you have so many different options.
Yeah.
Hey, if you could take a minute, I know you've discussed this a little bit already, maybe, and just kind of talk about the outline of the course, kind of what are your, I guess, what distinguishes you from other programs possibly? What are the
Yeah.
advantages of it, and kind of how you lay it out as far as, I guess, what's involved with the program,
What
what's
happens at
behind,
each
what, I guess,
level?
the conceptually, what are the, what do you do with the program? What are your
Yeah.
points of emphasis?
For sure. So I would say our number one, well, the two things, we have two goals for people in the program. One is that beekeepers are learning science-based, research-focused beekeeping information. So we are teaching, excuse me, best management practices based on the current research. So that's goal number one. And then goal number two is that beekeepers are then taking those best management practices and they are teaching other people about bees through public outreach and through mentorship, like Brian just talked about. So those are the two foci of the program. And so, we're really highlighting just like good, solid bee facts, so you are learning about the bees first. We start with honeybee biology because we always think, every practice that we do is rooted in what the bees are doing, right? It's rooted in their biology. And so if we can incorporate the biology into the practical components, I think that helps turn sort of, a somewhat reactive beekeeper into a beekeeper that is sort of understanding what's coming before it happens, right? If we can recognize the signs of swarming and the stimuli that cause swarming, then we can control swarming better in our colonies. So they go hand in hand, the biology and the practical components. So that's the main focus of the content that you're getting in the program. And that content is delivered through online narrated lectures, basically, kind of classic. We're trying to incorporate more sort of as funding and time allows, more like videos where we're out with the bees. We have a couple of those incorporated, but mostly it's sort of kind of classic classroom lecture style where you're learning about bees from Jamie Ellis and Cameron Jack mostly are the two instructors for the courses. So that's the kind of online class component. And, there's, like I said, there's 4 levels. The apprentice level really focuses on sort of basics, fundamentals, biology 101, an understanding of how to keep your bees alive for a year, basically. The second level gets more into all the pests and diseases and their biology. And again, understanding the pest biology helps us control them better. And also gets into, some of the products that we get from bees. So that's where we get into how to extract honey and those sorts of things. The master beekeeper level then kind of gets more advanced into sort of higher level biology. So not just those basics, but like, what are the dietary requirements of a larva? It gets really kind of more into the sciencey part of what bees do. And then touches into some of the more commercial sides of beekeeping. So pollination and queen rearing, live bee removal and pollination. And then the master level course, or master craftsman level course, like I kind of mentioned earlier, the focus there is really on the biggest piece of it is getting beekeepers involved in research and experimenting in their own hives in a way that they're getting data that is we can all kind of like try something out in our hives and think that it works, but if we're not using control hives, for example, and we're not considering different variables, then the numbers we're getting might actually not be right. We might be kind of convincing ourselves that a product works when maybe it doesn't, or vice versa. And so that program is really teaching you kind of how to read published research so that when, Dr. So-and-so publishes something about pollen patties, you can maybe actually dive into that journal article and get a better understanding of what they're actually saying. And then, taking that information into your own hives and kind of getting involved in your own experiments yourself. So that is the teaching piece of it. That's the education that you're getting out of it. So that's one piece. Another piece is obviously you have to be beekeeping while you're in the program. So there's some practical components there. There's always some practical assessment that you get at sort of the end of each level. The first 2 levels we talked about are kind of those videos where you're out with your bees, you're showing us, how to do a mite wash, for example, is one of the videos you have to do in the advanced level. And then let's see, what are the other pieces? So then the last kind of big and final piece that, again, this is where you want to compare different programs, is the education that you do for the general public and for other beekeepers. So we do really want this to be something where it's a continuation, where it's not just statically living with you, but then you're sharing what you're learning with other people. And people do get a little nervous sometimes about the like presenting in front of people, but two things to that. One is that I think almost every beekeeper is already an educator, whether they know it or not. As soon as you become the bee person in your world, right, you get every single question about wasps and bees and butterflies and anything that creepy crawls. So we kind of have that in us already. So first, I would just encourage you to say that, like, you can teach people about bees. You already know more about bees than they do. So like anything you teach them is going to be amazing. But then the second piece of that is that you don't have to get up in front of people and do a presentation, right? Like we've had people invite their neighbors over and do a hive demo with them. That's education as well. That's, you know, creating good neighborly relationships, you know. So there's lots of ways you can do those education pieces. But I think the big things that you get from this program, or that are different maybe from others, is that you can start anytime, you can take as long as you want, you can do everything with your own bees, which assessment wise is really nice because you're in your zone, you're using your hives, you're using your equipment. It's really the truest way to assess your skills because you're working where you actually work with bees. And then that educational component. There are several master beekeeper programs that don't have that. So if you're like really against teaching other people about bees, there's other options out there for you. But that is a part of this program. And I think a good part to stay involved in the beekeeping community as well. I don't take any of your money. I don't receive any of this. I get a salary. It's nice. But thank you, Amber. That's nice.
That's awesome.
I also just kind of love it. Maybe you can tell. I don't know. I mean, sometimes people think there's like 20 people that are doing everything behind the scenes. It's just me. So if it takes like 4 days for me to grade your practical, just give me a little bit of time. I'll definitely get to it.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty happy to help people when they get stuck on, you know, a technology thing or anything like that. So.
Well, Mary, when people go out and they're seeing things in their colonies and they're advancing through their program, what happens if they run into an issue with the bees? Do you just kind of make recommendations, or how do you manage that situation? Like, say you've got an apprentice or someone that doesn't know what they're seeing. How do you address that situation?
That's a great question. So we don't have any like mentorship the other direction built into the program. So we don't have anything official to kind of handle that. A couple of things is to always just reach out to us. And I am not the person with all the bee answers, but I know a lot of people with a lot of good bee answers. So generally we, you know, can help people just sort of think through what the problem is in their hive. And then the other thing, which is just sort of like a tired answer, but I really believe in it, is that we highly encourage people to join their local beekeeper association. Like anything anyone can teach you at a national level should go hand in hand with being a part of your local beekeeping community, whether that's a formal bee club or, you know, something like this where you're connecting with other beekeepers. Because that's a really good question. And I would say probably not something that we're really even trying to incorporate into our program. I think that's something that happens at the local level. Mm-hmm. And so we're always here to help. We're always here to connect you to resources. But yeah, that's a good piece that isn't a part of this.
One thing here in Alabama that, you know, a lot of people are nervous or a little bit paranoid, or I'm not sure what the word is, suspicious of the government. And so you get, bee inspectors. A lot of people are really, they don't want to involve the state in anything. But what I found here in Alabama with our local bee inspectors is that they are very, very, they just want to help beekeepers. They come out, the guy here locally comes out. He, he's not super like looking at everything you're doing wrong or looking for, products that maybe you're not supposed to use or anything like that. He just is interested in the health of your bees. So I think that's a great resource, at least here in Alabama. I imagine it's similar in other states where, like, maybe you're working along through a program like yours, or maybe you're not in a master beekeeper program, but don't hesitate to lean on, first of all, like you say, your local bee club. But if you can, the state inspectors are there to kind of help you. At least here, they're really good to just give advice. Yeah. And if they have a network of people, even in other states, like we're right here on the Alabama, Florida, Georgia in the corner in Dothan, Alabama here. And so we're basically the same climate as the Panhandle of Florida, very similar. We're
Mhm.
just literally 20 minutes from the Florida line. And so
Yeah.
if Philip here, he'll call the guy across the line down there in Florida, and he'll talk to him, and he'll say, hey, because there's a lot of commercial beekeepers down there, more than there are here in Alabama, and he'll say, hey, what are you
Yeah.
guys seeing? Bruce is seeing this. What do you think? And so they really want to help me and the beekeepers out. And so I think that's a resource that a lot of people kind of push aside. Maybe some states
Totally.
they're really kind of, the inspectors aren't real nice. They are like the law, but here, I mean, I guess they can be. If you're doing something illegal, they can get on you, but they're not looking to see, they just want to help you with your bees. And so I think that's a great
Yeah.
resource from someone who's professionally trained. If you get in a bind, if there's someone that can come out professionally that way. Of course, you do have the local bee clubs, but you know what they say, if you ask 5 beekeepers a question, you get 10 different answers. So sometimes that can get confusing for new people.
It can, but I think that's part of, you got to learn how to
It
wade
is.
through those answers,
That's
because
true.
like
That's true.
usually there isn't only one right way to do it.
That's
Just
right.
pick one of
That's
those
right.
5 and try it, see if it works,
Well,
But
I mean,
yeah.
Brian will tell you that's my MO is I try everything, and I still try everything. It's hard for me to narrow it back down and just kind of streamline everything. That's one of my big weaknesses is I try everything, and I kind of get in trouble. I do.
Bruce is the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to know what you're doing, Bruce.
I just try everything, and then if something doesn't work, sometimes I try it again.
Yeah.
And then again.
Maybe I did it again.
And then
well,
again.
we have
Yeah.
That's I do that some, but typically what it boils down to with me is I work full time, and I'm a sideliner beekeeper with over 100 colonies. I think I counted, Brian, I've got between 120 and 130 now, I believe. And it's with me, a lot of my issues are I'll fall back into old habits because of time restraints. I may not get my bees treated as quickly as I need to, and so I lose colonies because of that. I may have a certain type of queen or local queens or whatever that I use that are a little spicy, and I'm trying to get rid of that, but I don't have time to really go into a breeding program where I breed that out. And then I don't always, that's more what it's like. It's more of a time thing more than just, I want to keep trying the same thing over and over. But I have learned a lot of things really through this forum here, through other beekeepers, learning from commercial beekeepers and beekeepers here on this chat and throughout YouTube world and just throughout the world. I've learned of ways to be more efficient. I'm getting there, but it's just 110, 120 colonies is a lot to run and work full time. It's just a lot to do.
Yeah.
So, that's
so much.
Yeah. It can get on you in a hurry, and it before you know it, like right now, like life just happens. And so I haven't done washes on my bees. Now they look great. I went out there yesterday. I've got one bee yard that I've been trying to kind of fix, and I got some queens in. I got it, kind of some splits and got that. So I've been focusing on them for about 3 or 4 weeks. And I finally yesterday went out. I had the day off, like I said, and I went through most of my other colonies that I have, and hives are looking really good overall. But then when I started doing those mite washes, all of them except for 1 or 2 in each bee yard was within threshold. But there's one. So that maybe that's something you could speak on. I'm not sure how comfortable you are answering the question, but this is something that might be interesting. And I think other people have this issue as well. I'm kind of segueing into this topic. And maybe we would have to refer me to somebody else, but it seems to me like I'll have a bee yard with say 20 colonies, 10, 15 colonies. And, 88 of them will have perfect mite washes, 1, 2 mites well within threshold. And there's always 1 or 2 that's like washes 12 or 22 or 16. Do you have any idea why that might be? The genetics are obviously in every hive is a little bit different. I don't have like only bees from one queen breeder in my bee yards, but do you have any thoughts on why that may be, or why there may be one?
I can make educated guesses, which is my specialty. I have some biology to back it up, but I don't know the answer to that question. But here's the things I would look at. Is it always the one on the side? Is it always the one in the middle? Are they getting overly stressed in one location or the other? I would probably look at like what things, right? Because, we know that like mites make everything else harder for bees to deal with. Pesticides make everything else, nutrition, they're all tied together. And so like, if there's one thing that is already stressing that colony out for other reasons, then maybe they just can't manage their mite levels as well. So I would probably first look at like, is it regularly in the same location, or like, always on the side, always on the middle, something like that. My second thought would be it could be a viral load problem, which is certainly where my knowledge, slows down quite a bit. But we don't know so much about what the viruses are doing to the bees. We find more viruses every time we look for them. We know they're there. We know some of the things they're doing, but we don't know a lot of them. And so, I would wonder if maybe that colony has a higher viral load. Maybe it didn't overwinter as well, and it, built back up to a normal population, but was starting out weaker in terms of its like colony immune system.
Yes, it's very interesting. It seems that, when you pop the lid on a colony, you can have these colonies that are high on mites or viral loads that are sick. And when you first pop the lid, they might be the big, strong colony they cover all the frames. But when you start, I've gotten to the point I think I mentioned earlier before everybody hopped on here. There's just a difference in the bees, the way they act, the way they look, the way the brood looks. And it's not that they look super sick or that they look really, there's just something about them that's different. And I know that one of the colonies yesterday, I popped the lid on, I think it washed 22 mites actually. I just started looking through it and I was like, man, this thing just doesn't look right. They don't look like, there's not like the rhythmic, the healthy appearance or the activity that there normally is. And I'm like, well, and then I actually saw a mite on one of the bees, which is rare. I usually go through them pretty fast and you don't see that. And I'm like, well, I need to wash this one. And so I did, and it had 22 and you can just kind of tell. But then you can just kind of tell the ones typically that don't, this time of the year when the mites theoretically would be at their highest. And I have treated my mites too. That's what's weird about it. I've treated, but it's been a few weeks ago and you can just kind of tell a difference. And so it's just, anyway, that's been something that has stumped me. And there is no really rhyme or reason. It doesn't seem like, as far as typically it can just be, it almost seems random. I have my bees on pallets mostly, and they're all in pretty close proximity. It's not usually the one on the end or the one, closest to, it's usually, it can be just a completely random pallet bee, a colony on a hive on a pallet that has 3 that wash fine and then 1 that washes 15. It's just kind of bizarre how that happens. So I don't know. It could be.
Are they fairly equal population wise? Would you say
typically fairly. I mean, like I say, they look healthy when you pop the lid, but then when you start going through them, you can tell some differences.
Just because there's that, I'm sure you've all seen the classic graph of like the growth of the population, and then it's followed behind by the growth of the mites. So a lot of times,
that is
those
true.
Big booming colonies, they have the most mites in them because they're doing so well. They're reproducing, so much brood going on that there's a lot of places for mites to hide.
They start to breed back, and the mite load, actually the mite percentage increases. So I don't know. It's been I'm thinking, I've got this bee yard that has 25 colonies in it, and 3 of them are washed over threshold. Do I treat just the 3? Do I treat them all? What do I do? You know what I mean? Because they say you should treat them all, but do I really want to treat them all if some of them are zeros? What do I do? So those are the decisions you have to make as a beekeeper. And I typically treat everything, but I'm debating about just maybe treating, and this late in the year, we're north of University of Florida. We're here in Southeast Alabama. So we do get a little bit cold here. And so we do have our winter. Well, compared to Gainesville, Florida, it gets cold.
The coldest I have ever been is when I lived in Florida, and I grew up in Michigan. So it gets cold there. It's wet all the time.
But, that's the concern I have, is if I put Apigard or Formic Pro on them right now, do I shut the queen down when they're making their winter bees? And those are all things that I guess we all have to deal with. And it really varies depending on where you're at. So I've got to get a treatment on some, if not all, these colonies and just see what happens. But I thought I'd run that by you and just see. And if anyone in the comments is having that issue, just throw it in the comments and maybe why you think that might be, that you'll have 1 or 2 mite bombs in an entire bee yard. And just kind of interesting to me.
I would also maybe look at resistance. Maybe they're not reacting to your miticides.
Treatments.
Honeybee labs that'll check that for you now. So
it's interesting now with University of Florida, and you're kind of do they work in conjunction with Auburn and Georgia? Do the universities work together pretty well? I know that Auburn.
There's a lot of collaboration.
Auburn came down and did a study on my bees back in June, right before we pulled honey, and the Appleton bee yard I mentioned earlier. That's the one I've really been trying to work on fixing. They were just infested with mites. They did it. It was an Amitraz resistant study, You might be familiar with the study. They came and they took samples of 10 colonies, and they weren't all infested, but most of them had a fair number of mites. 2 or 3 of them were ridiculously high. And they found, overall the mites were not resistant to the amitraz or the apivar strips. And so, and it knocked, when I got the strips in, as soon as we pulled honey, it knocked the population of the mites way back. But I still ended up losing a couple of those colonies. I think they were just too far gone from the mites. But I've never had numbers like that in my life, and I was really glad they came and did that. So normally I wait a week or two after I harvest honey to put the strips in, but we just stuck the strips in as we pulled the honey that day. And anyway, Brian, we've got a few questions. I know we got a couple questions that people have asked about the program. Maybe we could address those.
I've already hit a number of them. They were around if you can do it all remote. It's just a couple different things. What each level, what are the requirements of each level? I know Tom had asked if you can test out, and I answered that here. You can test out of the apprentice, but everybody, I'll throw the link up again. That way, if you have any questions on the requirements of each level, that's in chat. I've put that in there, and I'll also put it in the description of this afterwards. So if you are listening to this after, just go to the description and the link it'll take you right to University of Florida's site. It will be in there. So there is one other, and this is one of those questions. Gary is just loaded with questions tonight. He's asking about notice mites this year in this area seem to be low. Wondering if there's anything to do with the severe drought. Wonder if there's anything. And for me, I would have no idea. I don't know if there would be a relationship between the drought and mite levels.
I have another educated guess I can throw at you, which is that droughts have pretty big impacts on foraging sources. And bees can only grow if they can forage, and mites can only grow if bees can grow, right? So I could see there being kind of a drop-down effect but then you would probably also see just, your bees looking not as good as well, right? So my question would be, are you kind of seeing reduced population sizes in your hives compared to what you normally see this time of year? Would be my follow-up to that.
I will say, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I have seen, like this year, like I said earlier, when I have done my washes, that's probably one of the only things that has been smooth so far this year. I've had a lot of washes that have been zeros, ones, twos, very low washes this year. And now, if that's related to the drought, I don't know. I did have some queen issues, though, earlier in the season. So if colonies are not brooding up, well, the mites are not going to grow. So my low counts, I pretty much was attributing to, I had queen issues, and I had several colonies that were not brooding up like they should have been. So if they're not brooding up, the mites are not breeding.
Yeah. That's, I've had in the mid-Atlantic here, it's been very rainy. It was very hot at the beginning of the year. Second half of the summer has been very rainy. And I, kind of similar to you, Bruce, I have 2 bee yards, which each have 2 hives in them. So this is a much smaller scale than you're talking about, Bruce. But in both of them, one hive had super low mites and one hive had some of the highest mites I've ever had in both of my yards. So that is an interesting just what's going on between the two. I wish I had an answer myself for that, but it's interesting. I wonder, Bruce, have you had a lot of rain this year? Because we've had a lot of rain, and it's definitely been some high mites.
We've actually had a really good year. It rained about the right amount through honey season. We did have a somewhat of a drought or a dearth, I would say, for about 4 weeks, like late July, early August, which is not good. It was very dry, but the biggest thing I've noticed with drier weather. And I think that people that live in desert areas, I got people out in California, Utah, I think that it really does make a difference with hive beetles. I might be wrong on that, but I think
Definitely.
in the hot and humid areas, I think you have more of a problem with hive beetles than you
Yep.
do in the more arid and dry areas. As far as mites go, I really don't know. I know they got mites in California and Utah and in desert areas. So I don't know if that's a thing. I do think it may have to do with strong bees, like you say, produce
Yeah.
more brood, which produce more white mites as well. That's just it's just something. It's a phenomenon. I didn't used to check for mites, and then I started doing that and doing washes, probably not as often as I should, but I'm trying to do better. And Ian from a Canadian Beekeeper is on here, and he says he's been washing zeros all day, which is good news up there in
Oh,
Canada.
that's
He's fighting.
amazing.
He always fights the mites. He's fighting them all the time up there, which we all are. But it seems to be a phenomenon for me. Whatever the bee yard, whatever location, whatever the size of the colonies, whatever the situation, it seems like, especially this time of the year when the mite loads are getting higher, that I'll have probably 80 to 90% of my colonies typically when I wash. Now this year that apple and bee yard was not like this, but typically I'll have a pretty good count in most of them, if not zeros, ones, twos, and then I'll have a outlier or two in 20, 30 colonies. It's just really strange to me. Now I just don't have the time to wash every single colony I have. I wish I did. I did that at one of my bee yards yesterday. I had, I think, 12, 13 colonies out there. I can't remember. I've lost a few out there, but once again, 2 of them I think were way above threshold, and 2 or 3 of them were within threshold, but a little bit more like 4s or 6s or whatever, and then the rest of them were like 0s or 1s or 2s. Just really good. As I would rather have 0, but it's just always just kind of baffled me why that is. But maybe there's some genetic factors. Maybe it's like you say that there might be a virus load. Maybe, and I do think genetics has a lot to do with it as well. Some bees are simply more resistant to mites, and that would be the goal. I think. Yeah.
I was just going to add, like, definitely don't make your queens out of those hives, obviously, right? Yeah,
sure.
I think that's probably, you did say you're using kind of diverse queens from different breeders and that sort of thing. So that it would be interesting if you had kind of records or notes of where you got your queens from, obviously, with that many bees.
Yeah, I just am not. I am not real good about that, but I do know I'm getting now to where I'm trying to kind of pinpoint and keep certain genetics in certain areas more than others. A lot of my base bees are feral swarms and stuff that I caught when I was beginning beekeeping. I built up pretty big, mostly using those. Yeah. But I have brought queens in from different places over the years, and so it's and I love the diversity. I've got a lot of really strong colonies, but it's just interesting to me. And I need to figure out what to treat these bees with here in the next few days, or I'm going to lose these. And some of them are the stronger colonies. It does seem like many times the high might lose this time of year in the stronger colonies. But it's just I'm just trying
population growth.
Just trying to hang on down here, and I do get behind on checks and things sometimes, and that's on me. I shouldn't probably have as many bees as I have, but I get down below 100, and then I have to make a bunch of splits and get back up above. I just can't stand to let them go down. I've got all the equipment I got to keep filled up, right? I got to keep the equipment.
Yeah. You couldn't have empty boxes in your barn or your garage. That'd be great.
That's right. Well,
I have one last thing on the genetics I would say is just like, this is I'm going to go back to my wildlife biology for 2 seconds, which is that, we have for a long time, humans planted one of the same thing over and over, right? So like city planners made this mistake a long time ago with elm trees, and then the emerald ash borer came and killed out all the elm trees, right? So like diversifying the genetics of anything you're trying to grow is always good, because if Bruce had gone and gotten all of his queens from the same place, and we don't know what the problem is, that's the problem with bees. You never really know. But because you are genetically diverse in your operation, you don't have all your eggs in one basket, right? So who knows what's happening with those colonies, but thankfully it's not happening to all of them at least, right? Because you have that genetic diversity. So I think that's a really good tip in general. Like, we might not know the answer, but we can all be better about, trying to keep new stock coming in so that it's not kind of a monoculture of bees.
Yeah. It's just, that's one thing we love about these bugs in a box, the it wants to make you, and I don't have a lot of hair, that's why I wear a hat, but it makes you want to pull your last hair out sometimes, but yeah, you love it. You love it and you hate it about them. You love the fact that there's such a challenge and they're
Yeah.
so cool and there's so many challenges to go along with it. But then that can also be the same reason why you just get frustrated and discouraged as well, because you can't just do one thing and it work every time. You got to try different things. And there's so many different, with all the diversity that is bred into bees, that's just how they've survived all these years,
Yeah.
that's how they survive, but it can be very, I guess that's the challenge. I think the challenge is why we all keep doing it partially.
Yeah.
It's just because it's such a cool way to be challenged and to develop your skills.
Yeah.
We don't want you to get bored out there, Bruce.
No, they won't. That definitely doesn't happen in my situation.
Yeah.
I'm not bored.
He would never get bored.
No.
With you being in the Baltimore area, I have to ask: have you had any of the spotted lanternfly honey?
I have not. It is not enough. They're not dense enough in the city of Baltimore for it to be a problem. I know Maryland beekeepers who are making it.
Mhm.
I haven't tasted it yet. I don't know what it's about. Yeah, but we have spotted lanternflies here for sure. We're always stepping
Mhm.
on them, but not in like the massive numbers that
Oh, okay.
the kind of surrounding areas have. And in the county, I imagine, is a bit more prevalent.
Yeah. I tried it. Another beekeeper that I know, and he's actually a partner of mine in a little beekeeping adventure that I'm involved in. He had some. I was out at his place, and he's on the Eastern Shore. He's what is it? Warwick, Maryland.
Okay, yeah.
He's on the shore. He had a little cookout, and I was out there, and somebody brought over a little jar of that honey, and it was a different flavor, but I prefer like the darker honeys. I prefer that more rich flavor as compared to, like your spring and like that clover, wildflower, whatever. I like that darker taste. So, but yeah, it was different. It was different.
Yeah, I'm just realizing that my honey that I harvested last fall or end of summer was super dark. And we kind of collectively as a community here decided it was maybe a chestnut tree, chestnut honey. But now I'm wondering maybe there was because it was a real, like the darkest honey I've ever gotten was from last year. And the stuff I harvested this year is just kind of a regular amber color. So that's an interesting, I might have to get my hands on some to taste it to see if I can compare it to what I have. That would be interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Well, while we are, let's see here, we're at 9:15. So while we are almost winding things down, if anyone has like a last minute question, throw it up. Like I said, I'll include links for the University of Florida program in the description. So if you have any questions, just go there. There's loads of information on that website. John hit the nail on the head there with that spotted lanternfly. It has somewhat of a smoky flavor. That's what I liked. So, yeah, and we don't like where I'm at in Northeast Ohio. I'm located like if you draw a line from Cleveland to Pittsburgh, right in the middle. And I know like my aunt and uncle that were just up visiting over the weekend, they're down in the suburb of Pittsburgh, and they said they are literally everywhere. Like you'll walk on the sidewalk and you're literally just stepping on them.
Oh
They
my
are
gosh.
all over the place.
That's
I
wild.
have not seen a single one here, but now they've seen them in Cleveland. So they're all around here,
Interesting.
but I haven't seen a single one in my area yet. So I almost want to have some. That way I can get to that honey.
They're kind of just annoying, and we don't even have them here in crazy numbers, but they're always jumping like directly into your face.
Yeah.
For some reason. Not a good like survival skill, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But Bruce.
There was one other thing I just wanted to, if you don't mind, share about the program I just thought of. And I know Brian joins these. We do try to do a little bit of, because a lot of the stuff you're doing in the program is sort of solo. We do have every other month we have a gathering, kind of like this. It's on Zoom. Everybody is kind of, on or off camera, but basically we just meet every other month and we talk about bees. Very similar to this. In fact, people share questions. We help each other out, try to figure out what's going on in their hives. So we do a little bit of mentorship in there. And then we often have folks from the lab come and share their research. So we have a postdoctoral researcher who's joining us in a week, basically less than a week. Next Tuesday is our next one. So she'll share some of her research and talk about some of the findings, and people will ask her questions. So it's kind of a nice little closed system where you get kind of one-on-one time with some of these researchers and hear about what's going on in the research side of things. So we do have a little bit of a online community in that way as well.
Yeah, there is. I was just looking at that. It's next. It's on the 8th, so next Tuesday. Yeah, I remember. There was the one that Jamie Ellis did on the yellow-legged hornet.
Yeah,
that was interesting.
Yeah. That's another one we're going to be, I don't know. I'm nervous about that one coming down the line. That's a pest that's been found in the Southeast, and it's a, potential scary predator of honeybees. So they're trying to do a good job of eradicating it, but it sort of seems like that might not be possible at this point. But that's, kind of learn about that sort of stuff, and anything new like that we usually have on one of these gatherings. And, it's a good way to see where people are coming from too. We have folks from all over the world who are in the program. So we have some international beekeepers who always join us. There's a good group from Australia and from around the Caribbean. So it's kind of fun to see, like y'all here, there's different ways of beekeeping in different parts of the world. So it's kind of good to have that input from folks as well on those gatherings.
And there's a Dominican beekeeper that just joined in a little bit ago. He's been in some of those Zooms, and I know. Yeah. So, nice. It's always awesome seeing folks from all over the place join things like that. So,
for sure.
But, Bruce, what do you have coming up in the next week, buddy?
Well, I just have to figure out how to treat these bees for mites. That's number one point of importance, and I do have the splits I made down at Appleton Farms. I do need to get some more food on them. I'm trying to feed them and build them up before winter. So hopefully they can come out of spring, like just going gangbusters. I've ordered some queens from Hawaii, from Heisel and Apiaries, Mary, and I ordered some in the spring. They did well, and I ordered some more. In Hawaii, they're producing queens almost year round. And so, it's pretty, if you want kind of queens almost any time of the year, it's pretty good to get them. It's a little more difficult in the late winter and spring because the commercial guys hit them up, before pollination. But right now is actually, I think, a pretty good time to buy queens from Zach out there. So, but that's what I did, and I made some fairly small splits, but I've been feeding them, and those queens it was about a month ago, and they're just good, doing really good so far. Hopefully they can get them at least in a full single deep before winter sets in here. But that's kind of the goal, is to get those bees fed, keep checking them. I'm going to figure out, I don't know what to use for mite control right now, but I'm going to do something as soon as I can. And that's really what's going on with the bees. I did want to, I don't know what the word is, just kind of recognize or just remember what's going on in the path of Helene up there. Absolute tragedy. We have some folks on here tonight who are either directly involved with that or very close by. Someone asked earlier about Ashby Miller, who lives in North Carolina. I reached out to Ashby. He said he is fine, but I believe he has some family that was in the very hard hit areas. And so just the tragedy that's going on there. Our numbers are down a little bit tonight, and that could be part of the reason why. I think there's a lot of folks up in that region that usually tune into us on these chats. And obviously this is of very minor importance compared to what those people are going through. So if there's any way, that we can help, whatever you can do to, at least keep them in your thoughts and prayers. And then if there's anything physically that can be done, I know our church is going over to Valdosta, Georgia, that was fairly heavily damaged in the storm. I think more wind damage, but then the floods are coming from the north through there as well. And and we're going to be going over. I'm not going to be going this weekend probably, but in the future, I'm sure we'll be making some trips over. But just please keep those people in mind. These bee chats are fun, and talking about bees is awesome, and bees are great, but there are a lot of people that are dealing with a lot of heartache and problems tonight. So we're be grateful for what we have, and hopefully we can help them out in any way possible. But as far as that, my own personal situation, like I said, I'm just going to be trying to do what it takes to keep these bees alive and come out in the spring ready to go. And really appreciate having you on tonight, Mary. It was very informational, and now you want me to, I want to sign up and join your program. So
That's good. I like that.
Maybe I will. I like
Doesn't sound like you have time.
like I need to add something else to my schedule. I'm very busy. I work full time. I do my bees, and then I do run a fairly substantial business with the bees. I sell a lot of honey. Honey has kind of been my emphasis point over the years, and that's how I kind of make enough money to feed the addiction, and then have a little bit on top. And so, like yesterday, I was off, and I went and checked bees in the morning and bottled up honey and delivered honey all afternoon. And so, that's kind of what my life is like. And then I'm a avid football fan, and I'm pretty involved with my church, and so I definitely. I stay busy. Keeps me out of trouble, I guess, right? But
when you get your Alabama winter, I don't know how much of a winter you get, that's a great time to work on some online modules.
Real quickly, what is the average time it takes to complete this course? I know it varies, but like say if you're starting, like say for example, I would probably try to test out of the apprentice program, or I may try to take it, I'm not sure. But if the average person that's had bees for a little while and wants to get in the program and kind of get that certification, what is the average time you think that it takes to kind of get through the program?
So if you test out of the apprentice level, or if you at least come into the apprentice level with a year of beekeeping experience, then, it's a little hard to say because most people don't go to the master craftsman. So if we cut that part out as sort of a specialty, to get to the master beekeeper level would be essentially 2 full years is what most people take to get through the master level of the program.
Is there when you go into the courses, and you may have addressed this and I may not have heard you, like say you go to just say for example where Brian is now, he's in the master's level going through that process. Is there a minimum amount of time that you have to be in that program to complete it, or you just kind of complete the check marks as you go through the program?
Yeah, it's 1 year. So it is that kind of to get that full beekeeping season as you're, as you're learning the more advanced things, you're kind of applying it in real time. Awesome. And yeah. I
think that's actually really good that people can't just go in and take the test and then send you a couple of videos and just be done with it. And I when you were going through the program earlier, I knew you couldn't do that, but some people are super highly motivated and they might be like, well, I'm just going to whiz through this thing as fast as I can.
I have a couple people right now who are a little salty with me because they're like, I finished everything. What do you want me to do? And I'm like, go work your bees. You got to see what beekeeping in the fall is like, So we do hold pretty hard and fast to that because that's the practical piece. We're not, otherwise you're not getting your hands in your bees for enough time. So that time component is important.
Awesome. We appreciate your time tonight, and thanks for being patient with us and all the questions. But you're doing a good thing. And I've never really thought I needed to do a master beekeeper course. But the more I think about it, it wouldn't be a bad idea if I can figure out the time to do it. So it's in the back of my mind that I went to the Alabama Beekeeping Association conference this past weekend, a weekend ago, and they have a course. They have a master beekeeping course up there as well. But I know Brian's going through this program, really is enjoying it. And so I may look into it further down the road.
Around, find the one that fits you best because there's a lot out there. And
I like this one because it can be done remotely, the Alabama one. I think there may be some stuff you could do online, but you do have to actually go physically and take some courses, and that's difficult. But Brian.
And if anyone has questions, you're welcome to email me directly as well. That's, or email the lab and they'll get funneled to me. So I'm always happy to chat with people. If you're unsure if it's a good fit for you or not, just, give me a call, send me an email. Happy to talk. So
great.
I'm open.
All right, Brian.
Yeah.
It's all you, Brian.
It's all me. Well, next week, I tell you here, as soon as I get back over to my apiary, I'm going to take care of the 2 colonies that I have that just kind of need the last bit of work. And then it's, like here where we're at, it's just kind of ride the temps and keep the feed and that on them until it's too cold to have the syrup on them. and then my insulated inners are going to go on with the fondant. So, we're pretty much done. I do have a couple frames. I put on a couple extra supers just to see what would happen. And I do think I might end up pulling a couple frames of fall honey. There was more than what I thought would be over there. We had and for the drought that Ohio had, I didn't think that we would have any, but then I go over and I'm checking my colonies, and I was switching this year to single brood. So I've got the single deep, and then I've got the supers. And when I'm breaking the boxes and I'm seeing nectar on the tops of the frames, I thought, well, that's kind of odd. So we had a better flow than what I thought we would have. And there's a considerable amount of weight there. So I probably will harvest a little bit of fall honey just so that, we have it here. My wife and I love the fall honey. My mom loves fall honey. So I'll probably harvest enough that will have enough to get us, to next season. But other than that, I think I probably will store some of those frames so that I can equalize throughout the apiary just to make sure that they all have weight. So that's about it here. I mean, we are pretty much about wrapped up, like I said. So as sad as what that sounds, this season is pretty much done. So,
Yeah, we had a great year down here, but it had its challenges as they all do. Mary, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Test for mites. That's my final thought. That is my number one beekeeping advice for everybody. If you don't know what your mite numbers are, you don't know enough. You got to know what your mite numbers are because you can't react otherwise. So that's my number one advice to every beekeeper. Check your mite loads.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Mary, you did say something, and before we end, you said something earlier about, not being a reactive beekeeper. And I went and I did a talk at one of the local bee clubs last year. And the title of the PowerPoint that I had put together was being a proactive versus reactive beekeeper.
That's perfect. I think that's the goal. The more you know about your bees and your local seasons, the more you're going to be able to figure out what's going to be happening before it even happens to you. And that's really the only way to get ahead of stuff like mites and swarms and honey flows, right? It's just paying attention and getting your hands in some bees.
Yeah. So true. So true. Well, everybody, I cannot do like the outro like that there Mr. Burns does. Greg is always like he's the man of many words. He'll always say what his grandfather was the old preacher. So, and Greg just goes and goes and goes. It's a bummer he couldn't join tonight, but he's spending time with family, so that's okay.
Ryan, Paul has it there for us to say at the end. He's got it written in there.
There we go. He got it.
So as we close it out,
go ahead, Bruce. It's all you.
As we close this out tonight, we appreciate you coming on, Mary, and remember to be the lighthouse and be the change that you want to see in this world. Y'all take care.
Love it. Thanks for having me all.
We'll see y'all.